Hello, this is Hardin Coleman, Faculty Director for the Center for Character and Social Responsibility at Boston University's Wheelock College of Education and Human Development. You are listening to the very first season of Caring, Character, and Community, the Center's podcast. In this season, we will focus on learning from leaders about how they integrate the ethic of caring, a focus on their own and others' character development, and a commitment to serving the needs of the community in order to guide and inform their leadership in times of crisis. This is part three of our inaugural season, which will focus on bringing you the perspective of four youth-serving community-based organizations. In today's episode, we're having a conversation with Ayele Shakur, who is Chief Executive Officer of Build. Ayele has spent most of her career at the intersection of education and equity. She's been a classroom teacher, led several youth-serving organizations, chaired the education committee for the Boston NAACP, and is co-chair of the Opportunity and Achievement Gaps Task Force for the Boston Public Schools. She is now CEO of Build, whose vision is of a world where all students, regardless of race, socioeconomic status, or neighborhood, have the opportunity to develop the skills needed for personal and professional success in the 21st century economy, and whose mission is to use entrepreneurship to ignite the potential of youth from under-resourced communities and propel them to high school, college, and career success. Ayele, thank you for spending time with us.
Hi, Hardin. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. So I want to start with learning a little bit more about what Build does, what you think its core issues are, and what it's trying to accomplish.
Well, Build was actually founded back in 1999, so we're over 20 years old. We started in the Bay Area in East Palo Alto, and we really actually started out as a dropout prevention program, teaching entrepreneurship to young people in East Palo Alto as a way to get them excited about learning and plug back in to their academics and ultimately put on a path to college and career success. And so Build has always been at the intersection of entrepreneurship, college access, and career readiness. And we always say we're helping young people become the CEO of their own lives. So we go into high schools, typically high schools that may be the lower performing schools in a district. And we actually take over an entire class. So Build is an elective offered during the school day, taught by a teacher from that school. And students are becoming the CEO of a company that they're creating and really bringing ideas to life and then learning all sorts of wonderful skills along the way.
So, tell me, why is that important? I mean, why does this approach, when, so much focus on academic competence and math skills and language skills become so central to the world? Why do you think this type of work with youth is important?
Well, as you said, with the title of your show here, the importance of character is really, really central to how young people develop into future leaders of tomorrow. And so we know that, as a former dropout prevention program, that 90% of the young people who drop out of school say they leave because they're bored and they don't see any connection between what they're learning in school and what's happening to them in the real world. Mm-hmm. And so we have to bring more real world learning, more hands-on project-based learning and activities to young people to really bring the learning to life and to help them to connect those dots in very meaningful ways. And so through entrepreneurship, you're not just learning how to start a business, although that definitely is a portion of what we do in Build, right? So students are starting real businesses with real money they get to keep, but they're also learning how to be adaptive and nimble, how to think critically and to problem solve. They're learning how to pivot and how to learn from failure. So that idea of growth mindset that we know is so important in education. They're also gaining a sense of confidence, really understanding who they are as leaders, seeing themselves in the driver's seat as they're building their own business. So we're building that sense of ownership and agency. These are all transferable skills. And so once a young person is confident, believes in themselves, has mentors that believe in them as well, once that light bulb goes on, that's when they're able to really connect with those academic skills that we know are also equally important for their growth and development.
Can you give an example? I'm sure you have lots of them, but can you give an example what your one or two examples of where you've seen this really work very, very well, and where you've seen this transform either a child or even a whole community's world, and also an example of when it hasn't worked so well?
Mm, yeah, great question. There's so many wonderful stories of the students in Build. I'll just focus on one young man who's sort of top of mind for me. His name is Julian, and he came to Build over 8 years ago for our inaugural class that started in Build Boston. And that was when we launched, actually back in 2010, so even more than 8 years ago.
Mhm.
But he started out as a freshman, as all of our students do, 14 years old in the ninth grade, really, not terribly confident, certainly still trying to find himself, trying to find, his sense of purpose and to try to develop the confidence skills that he needed. He ended up joining a team that developed a cell phone cases. They developed cell phone cases with inspirational slogans on the back, and they were called the Dream Team. And that young man formed a really close relationship with his other teammates. They were one of the most successful teams in Build that year. In fact, they went all the way on to win the business plan competition that year that we do at the end of the year. And he was like the VP of marketing, so really using his creative skills with the marketing and the packaging and some of the other promotional materials for that company. But really through the Build experience, he developed his voice, right? That sense of ownership, that sense of direction. He learned how to do public speaking, how to think about customer service. He learned all of the financial skills that go into running a business. But also importantly, just as importantly, he formed really strong bonds with his mentors in Build. And as we think about the social and emotional learning of our young people, that mentoring component is really part of the secret sauce in our program. And so he had two wonderful mentors, Slava and Shonak Patel and Slava Men. And what was really exciting about Julian's story is that he actually just graduated from Pine Manor College with his bachelor's degree in business. And it was Slava and Shonak who helped him make it through, because in these last 2 years dealing with COVID, he had so many bumps in the road. He was on his senior year, about to go into senior year in college and about to give up. And his mentor said, we don't give up. We're the dream team. Let's keep going. You can do it. You're so close to the finish line. And he actually was able to graduate this past spring. So now Julian's actually heading into a career in real estate.
Mhm.
Again, continuing to just credit Build for giving him the confidence and those skills of adaptability and grit and perseverance that he needed to push all the way through. And of course, he credits his mentors for
Mhm.
having his back and never giving up on him along the way.
There's so much in there, and that I want to follow up on. The first is, it sounds like one of the things that Bill does when it's working well is not just the skill development, it's also getting a sense of community, that you're known by other people in a world, and that they are there for you, particularly for kids in under-resourced areas where the many of the adults in the world may not have the capacity, not they don't want to, they just don't have the time, the resources to make space for the individual to grow. Is that part of what Bill does?
Yes, and that piece is so, so important. It's really about connections, it's about social capital, it's about relationship
Mhm,
building.
mhm.
And so our young people in Build, they all have mentors as they go through the program. We also have a constellation of other volunteers, business coaches, judges at the competitions, lots of adults that come into their lives. But it's so important, and the research bears this out as well. It's so important for every young person to have a caring adult role model in their life to really help them navigate, really all of the complexities
Yeah.
of life that come our way. And, Julian comes from a great family. His parents are very invested and
Mhm.
involved in his life, but he's a first generation college student.
Yeah.
And so how do you navigate, being a first generation college student when your parents
Mhm.
have not had that same experience? And so in this instance, his mentors were able to really fill that gap and really stand in the gap there for him
Mhm.
and help to push him through.
Yeah.
I think, we can't underestimate the importance of adult role models in the
Mhm.
lives of our young people as they're building their own sense of identity and purpose And really, along that whole youth development journey, it's the adults that are pouring into them, even beyond their own household,
Yeah.
that can make all the difference in a young person's life.
You said something just then that I struggle with in the conversations around helping our children acquire access to opportunity. And you talked about these mentors as being supporting of what the family's already done, building
Yes.
on existing strengths and assets rather than what one could call more of a missionary model, which is I'm going to save these kids from their tough situations and I'm going to bring them into my world and move them forward into opportunity. Is that part of Build's ethic that you need to think about the care of the community from which children are members of and how to
Right.
facilitate that? Am I making that up or is
No,
that?
no, I think that's exactly part of our ethos. And, our students are already brilliant. So Build is not creating brilliance.
Yep,
We're
yep.
just helping students tap into the brilliance that's already there. And they
Mhm.
come from vibrant communities. I live in the community, right? And so our
Yep.
communities are vibrant and have so many assets and so many wonderful
Mhm.
community members who are here. It takes a village to
Yep.
raise a child. And so what Build does is really just helps to activate some of that brilliance and some of that connection that's already there in the community and in our young people's
Mhm.
households, and
Mhm.
really to be there as a partner with our young people just to help them on that journey. But every parent that we've encountered wants the best for their young people. They're definitely pouring into their young people in the same way that we're kind of pulling up as a partner in that journey and along that experience as well. But we definitely value and come at this work from an asset lens,
Yep.
knowing that, again, our young people bring the brilliance with them every day. We're just helping them to really unlock that. We also see our mentoring program as a two-way street. And
Mhm.
so it's not just about mentors coming out of the business community to work with young people, but it's also them coming into the community, into our schools, and realizing all of the assets and talents and beauty that is already there.
Mhm.
So it becomes an incredible learning and transformational experience for our mentors as well. And so many of our mentors have said, I got so much more out of this experience than what I was even able to bring myself. And so they leave transformed and just much more activated to really fight for racial equity and social justice, just knowing how many communities have been overlooked and underestimated for far too
Mhm. So you said earlier you talked about the importance of build in facilitating the growth of a child's character, participant's character. And then you also use the social emotional learning language
long.
as well, growth mindset, a theory of initiative, sense of agency,
Yes.
those things that we associate. How do you think about those are those for you as character and being socially competent the same or are there differences in your mind?
I think they're different, but I think they are very much connected.
Mm-hmm.
So, in Build, we're teaching 6 Spark skills. These are 21st century skills and also social emotional learning skills. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's communication, collaboration, problem solving, innovation, grit, and self
Mm-hmm.
management. We're
Mm-hmm.
teaching very explicitly towards those 6 Spark skills. We actually do a diagnostic test at the beginning of the year when they start out with us as freshmen. And
Mm-hmm.
then every year thereafter, we'll continue to do a post end of year assessment so that we can track the students' growth in those 6 Spark skills. Those Spark skills are really important. Like they are the skills that set students up for success in
Mm-hmm.
not just in high school, but in college and in their careers, as well as in their lives. But those 6 skills are not all that young people need, right? So they also need a sense of empathy, and that's something that we've been really focusing on quite a bit in
Yeah.
builds, especially over this last year and a half when our nation's going through this racial reckoning.
Yep.
The pandemic has really widened everyone's eyes to all of the
Mm-hmm.
systemic inequities. And really, we wanted to go much deeper with young people, not just focusing on entrepreneurship, but social entrepreneurship and civic engagement. So as part of that character development, helping students understand how do you use your entrepreneurial mindset and skills, not just to make a profit, but to make a difference.
Hmm.
And how do you think about really empathy as one of the design thinking principles,
Hmm.
right? We need to be able to empathize before we can actually design and create products and services. But that empathy experience actually opens them up to deeper conversations about how they interact with each other as humans. And so, really looking at empathy, skills around resilience, the ability to adapt, to learn from your failures, to show up in the world as a servant leader. Those are all character development traits that are really important that we're increasingly trying to foster.
You know what's really what I find very exciting about part of your definition there is that too often when people talk about character, everyone assumes you're talking about this individual's virtue and this individual what
Mm,
they have and who they are. What you're saying is important, but you're also identifying that part of character is how you use it in the world and how you
mhm.
use it to move other yourself and others forward. And that, in your understanding of character, those two things work together. Independently, they may not be as sustainable or important. Does that make sense to you?
It absolutely makes sense. And, for us, we're really thinking about economic empowerment and building thriving communities. In fact, we have a new Thriving Communities challenge, which
Hmm.
is the design challenge that we've released this year. Again, focused on social entrepreneurship and civic engagement, and really helping young people see themselves as part of a community.
Hmm.
And so, your leadership and your growth as an individual is so that you can give back, so that you can actually help to move your community forward.
Hmm.
So it's not just enough for, we're not trying to build capitalists through
Yeah.
entrepreneurship, right? Where you're just sort of going for yourself and it's all about profit and, you're not looking out for your brothers and sisters, but really to look at growth as a community and
Hmm.
for each of our young people in build, who we call builders,
Yeah.
right? You're not only building yourself, you're building for your family, you're building for your community, and ultimately for society at large.
And the part of the work of the center is kind of how do we have conversations about that and it's so easy to do the one or the other and to tell funders, well, we're focused, we know what we're doing, and we're driving here, and here are our outcomes. As soon as you get into the and piece,
Mm.
it may look like you're losing focus, but I'm hearing from you that character and social responsibility, they do go hand in hand, and that's what moves us all forward. So in creating opportunity for one child, you also want them to be not pulling up the ladder behind them, which historically is
Right,
a problem in lots of
exactly.
communities. It's like how do I climb that ladder and make it stronger and bigger and put down four more for others to follow me?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. We've even gotten more intentional in thinking about our alumni program. And one of our stated goals is around builders giving back.
Yeah.
So, we have students all the time organically coming back, helping out in classrooms and so forth. With the younger, the 14-year-olds that are
Yeah.
now just coming through the program. But we want to make that an even more intentional feedback loop where
Hmm.
the alumni, yep, we want you to come back. We expect you to come back
That's right.
because we want to always be pouring in to that next generation. And there's also just so much value in these near
Hmm.
peer relationships
Hmm.
as we think about personal development and character development. So much, so often it's about adults trying to help young people build these skills, but the near peer piece is also really important
Yeah.
so that younger students are hearing from older students who are further along on their life journey who can really reflect back on why those character traits and character
Mhm.
development is so important.
So tell me a little bit. What draws you to this work? What got you? You have a wonderful academic career. You were in a position where you could be drawn into lots of other parts of the American workplace, everywhere from inside education, management. What drew you to this work?
Well, at first, what drew me into education, I was actually in Hollywood, California, trying to be a screenwriter,
Mm,
and actually fell into teaching as a way just to kind of pay the bills. I thought, oh, I'll be a teacher for a year or so, and
yeah, yeah.
there was a teacher shortage at the time, so they had ads on TV at night. Oh, if you've got a degree, come and teach. And so I actually ended up as a teacher in Compton, California, right at the height of really the gang violence, and gangster rap was bursting on the scene. And I was teaching first and second graders.
Yeah.
And they were just full of joy and energy and
Mm,
creativity and curiosity,
yeah.
and just really saw the beauty of our young people as learners juxtaposed against this environment around them in the community that at the time was really swirling in a sense of chaos at that time. And yet, even then, there was beauty in the residents coming together to really think about how do we preserve the strong fabric of our community and
Yeah.
really start to really minimize and eliminate some of the gang violence that was happening
Mhm.
at the time. But it was that notion of being able to teach a young person to read at 6 and 7 years old, to be able to tap into that curiosity, despite all that was swirling around them, and get them to a place of progress and growth, and
Yep.
to see that spark of inspiration come on for our young people. I think it's that light for our young people when they feel like they can't, and then
Yep.
they learn that they can,
Yeah.
and they discover the power that's in themselves, again, tapping into their own inner greatness. And so after that experience, 2 years in Compton, came back to Boston. That's where I got my master's at Harvard, and then just started teaching in the Boston public schools, and eventually thought I could have a deeper impact in the after school arena.
Yep.
But I think for my entire career now, 30 years of working in education, it's always been about that light. How do you get that spark of inspiration to come on when that young person truly believes in themselves and truly understands just how great and just how brilliant they are? Because after that light bulb comes on, they're unstoppable, right?
Yep.
You
Yep.
just can't
Yep.
stop them at
They're
that point,
motivated. They know.
because they know that everything is possible, and they've made the connections along the way to the adults who are going to really help to make those
Yeah.
goals come.
So that's a great way to think about a little bit what we're trying to do in this podcast series, which is lift up people like yourselves who are thinking through how do we in this very polarized world create experiences for children where they feel cared for, children and adults. I think what we're hearing
Children and adults,
consistently
exactly.
here that this is not what I'm doing for kids. It's what we as an adult community, as we bring caring and how I support this ethic of caring, that this is for you. It's not that I'm sympathetic or I'm not that I'm doing it for you out of a missionary zeal. It's like I care for you. I want you to feel that so that that and give them that safety so they can have a sense of joy, a focus on developing their personal skill set and not just
Mhm.
their own social competence, but also their sense of their responsibility in the world, and then feeding them into a community experience that gives them opportunity to practice, fail a little bit sometimes,
Failure is important. We
and
learn a
but
lot.
then be
Yep.
in a community of care that they can grow, build, and that strengthens. We all grew up with the theory that failure is one of the things that strengthens the character. I think of my failures, and I wouldn't be some of the things I do well. I wouldn't have done if I hadn't failed earlier.
Yes,
So,
so
in that,
true.
how do you think about your role in bringing constituents outside of the young adults who are joining Build? How do you think about your role in the broader community? Who are your constituents in the broader community that you feel responsible for bringing along to see the way these lights turn on in a way to create more access to opportunity?
That's a good question. Wow. I think that I would actually start with the educators themselves. I think that there are so many wonderful, talented teachers in every city where I've worked, and Build is in Boston, New York, DC and the San Francisco Bay Area. We're in Oakland, East Palo Alto. We now have a presence in Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Memphis. We're starting to really spread out across the country. And in every city that I've been in, there have been these amazing teachers who really understand this, how to connect with young people, not in this, again, like I'm here as the hero that's coming in, but really to create deep relationships and connections with young people that are nurturing and affirming. And I think that there are also educators who are not as skillful at that. And I think if we're really going to help young people to thrive and to develop the academic skills that we need them to have as they're in school, we have to learn how to create those real authentic connections. Students are really good at sniffing out adults who are not really genuine in their interactions with them. And so, I think that more adults need to focus on, and again, focusing on our educators, focus on the relationships first before we start trying to pour in the academics, because the relationships are what opens the doorway for students to receive the information. And I think I talked a little bit about, just the focus about that light bulb coming on. For me, it's that idea of engagement and inspiration for our young people. And I always tell other educators, you cannot teach over disengagement. Right? If a student is not plugged in, they're not connecting with you, it doesn't matter what you're trying to pour into them, you're not going to be able to get that learning to stick until that engagement has been fostered first. And that engagement usually comes through that sense of connection and sense of relationship building. I think also then beyond our educators, our school districts are starting to say more about, they're understanding the importance of social and emotional learning and character development. But I think we have to understand better ways of fostering that, particularly for our older students. Typically, districts are really good at figuring that out and what that looks like for our elementary school students and the kindergartners, and there's all these wonderful character lessons. There's wonderful character lessons there, but we have to figure out how we're pouring that in for our middle schoolers and high schoolers who are at these critical points in their own youth development. And I think that's one of the things the programs like Build do really well, is we're bringing that thread into the work where students are learning by doing. And again, that idea of failure, you fail multiple times in entrepreneurship, but you're just constantly learning and growing from that failure with lots of adults around you to help you process what did you learn, how do you keep moving forward. And I think lastly, in terms of the external community, we've got to get to the policymakers, the folks who are making decisions about, what are the standards, what's most important in our classrooms, how are we assessing and evaluating our young people. There are so many policies right now, particularly some of the high stakes testing and sort of this high focus on high stakes that doesn't allow the space for teachers to make those connections and to really be going deeper in the character development. So again, we're sort of so focused on the skill and drill that we're missing those moments to create the opportunities and create that fertile ground for the learning to actually take place. So I think there has to be a shift at the policy level as well.
I mean, we talk about, for you, it sounds to me like you're saying, how do we create a community of learners where caring for the person is central, in which they feel engaged, and that's going to open them up to the learning. And that just learning, just academic proficiency and a focus on that alone is not sufficient.
It's not going to get us there.
Not sufficient.
Right. Yes. And there's so many wonderful community partners too. Again, thinking about community, it's very often in those community centers, the community-based organizations, that so much of that, the character development and the social and emotional learning is taking place. So I think we have to also find ways to bring those community partners into the classrooms so that some of that learning is happening also during the school day and not just relegated to, that's in the after school arena or what happens on the weekend. Like, how do we bring community into the classroom as well?
Much deeper collaboration among the adults in the child's world is fundamental. Less polarization, less argumentation among us.
Less siloing, right? Now, there's a lot of siloing in our education system. I think if we start to take those walls down and create more connections across the ecosystem of where young people are learning. They're learning at home, they're learning in community, and they're learning in the classroom, in their schools, and we need to see that it's in all of those places. They're learning now with their, on the jobs, right? Wherever they're doing their after school jobs, they're learning now, maybe on a college campus doing early college classes. And so as we start to intentionally blur the lines
Yeah.
that are siloing the various contexts where students learn, we can create a much richer and deeper experience for all of our young people.
So one of the last questions I had for you, and I think I heard the answer, so I'm going to share what I think I heard, so you can correct me. And that is, if you had to pick a lever, pick a lever in this system change work you're doing. So your basic work is working with kids in a set of kids in a variety of programs and school-based activity. So then, which is it leads you in many different directions, building community. But it sounded to me that the lever, if you were going to focus on a lever of change that would make your work easier, and maybe would be really looking at the social emotional development of the adults
Mm.
work with children. That if we really took the time at professional development or teacher training or wherever, or preparation of community organizers, if we made sure, as we want to do with children, that they have a certain set of social emotional skills, that they have a certain sense of commitment to others, that they're willing to do the hard work to follow through on the character piece, that if we could do more of that, we could silo less, work together, be more collaborative, have a stronger community. Did I hear that? Or am I just
Yeah, no, I think that's an interesting way to look at the work, Hardin. And I think if we could go even more granular and say, like, what is that skill set or what is that trait we need to foster more of? I would call it as empathy. But I think we need not sympathy, right? You're not going to sympathize for other
Yep.
people, but
Yep.
empathy, where you're really understanding those assets and talents, and what are they contributing, and how do you connect with that in a meaningful way. And I think our adults could really learn a lot from, if there was more empathy for the families that they're engaging with, this
Yep.
understanding the student's context, understanding the other learning environments where that young person is having these other learning experiences. And I think, again, too often there's such a siloed effect on how the adult in our students' lives are even doing their work, so they're not really connected. I heard one of my colleagues said we need to get more teachers to come out to Sunday church because they would learn so much on a Sunday service, just sitting in the community,
Yep.
At some of our churches, about the context in which our young people are living and thriving along with their families. And so I think trying to create more of that sense of empathy, understanding, and connection would go a long way towards building those authentic relationships.
Don't get me going on community schools, because
There you go.
that'll be a different argument. So we don't want to we don't want to go neighborhood schools. I hear you. I'm with you. And you go to community, but we won't go there. So before I let you go, and thank you so much for your time here. What advice would you give your younger self, looking back and thinking about what would you say to yourself that, do more of that. Good on you. Stay there. This has really worked. Or, what else would you recommend? It's particularly since what we hope the people who listen to this are emerging leaders, young leaders, people exploring what they may want to do in the world. What advice would you give your younger self?
I would say stay connected. Stay connected to the young people. I try to do that. I mean, as I've gotten further along in my career, the downside of being a CEO of a national organization is you have fewer direct touch points with the young people themselves. But we learn so much from those interactions with the young people. So I would say no matter what stage you are in your career, it's those strong, authentic relationships. And it doesn't have to be you've gotten to know every single student.
Yeah.
If you're a teacher in a classroom, you definitely need to. But if you're more of an administrator, I always tell the new people coming to build, pick one class and pick one small team of students. Pick like 3 to 5 students, and you're going to get to know them, or even just pick one and just really get to know that young person, because you'll see so much through their eyes. You'll understand so much differently about their experience. What are the things that are meaningful to them? what are the ways we can improve our programming?
Yep.
What are they finding valuable? What are they not finding valuable? And we always take so much away that we learn ourselves as adults
Yep.
from those interactions with our young people. So, just realize they have so much to teach us, and just stay open to the learning, because you will learn so much just as you interact.
Yeah. So
The young
remember
people.
that as a leader,
Yes.
being intimately in touch with the people you're most concerned with serving.
We got to keep our feet on the ground. It doesn't matter what your role is. If
Yep.
you're in this field of education and youth development, you've got to be where the young people are,
Yep.
to really be able to make decisions that matter from the top.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate that. And if you think of anything else you'd want to share, please let us know. And we hope you have a great day. And I guess now that the pandemic is over, you'll be traveling more. So
Well,
you're back on the
yes,
road. So
indeed. Thanks so much for having me on, Hardin.
thank
This
you
was a
for
great
sharing. So
conversation.
you take care. Have a great day.